Spring practice will be here before we know it. But what are Auburn football's biggest areas of need headed into the fall? Welcome on into the Auburn Express, powered by the War Report. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for giving us a listen today. Joining me as he does every week is my good friend Chris Phillips from SEC Unfiltered. Chris, it's been kind of an exciting offseason so far. I know you guys are busy over at SEC Unfiltered. Before we get into it, man, how are things going?
Mike, what's going on, man? It's always a pleasure to jump on with you. And yeah, it's there are some out there that will proclaim there is no off season. I tend to disagree. There is an off season. There's a time we talk about things such as uniform rankings and way too early predictions and way too early top 25s. We don't do those things in season. So there's an off season for SEC football, but certainly, like you mentioned, Mike, SEC sports. I mean, I'm on the road right now. We're in Knoxville, Tennessee for the Tennessee-Kentucky basketball game on Tuesday night. We're going to be all over the road for basketball, baseball. We'll be making a trip down to the Plains soon, but always exciting to talk Auburn football and SEC sports with you as well, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Chris, I appreciate you always. Look, man, let's jump right in here. Auburn football has a lot they've got to get done this spring. It was a disappointing 2024 campaign for Hugh Freeze and his team of coaches, but they've got to turn it around. Now, you can't pick QB. What are Auburn's biggest area of need headed into the spring in your mind?
You know, I'm going to start first and foremost, Mike, and I don't know that this is something, and I don't think you're going to be able to find this out during spring ball, but there's obviously talent on this team. It's about how is the talent utilized. I think player personnel, again, utilization of the talent on the roster, like you mentioned, goes far beyond the quarterback position. There's plenty of talent on this football team. We saw what DJ Durkin did last year with the defense as well. It falls on Hugh Freeze, and it falls on this coaching staff. Again, I don't know that that's something you can really figure out during spring football. I don't know if maybe a crop of new players, we've talked to some different Auburn folks that maybe they feel like that the leadership change, letting young guys come into being more so in leadership positions could help change, the overall culture within the locker room. Maybe that was a problem, and I don't know if that's, again, you're able to figure that out in spring, but that's, I think, the need for Auburn, Mike. It's not like Auburn needs to reinvent the wheel and there aren't any good players on the roster. They went out and got more of them, obviously, over the offseason. But how does this Auburn team learn how to win? And are the guys that were there last year able to use that and get better from it and not let it define them that, when Auburn inevitably gets into these close ball games and down the stretch and, it's a tie ball game with 2 minutes left or you're up by 3. How do you not throw that pick six? How do you not make that blunder or that mistake down the stretch that costs your team a football game? That's the thing that I think is really going to determine whether Auburn has a successful season or not. And again, a lot of that goes back to Hugh Freeze, his coaching staff, putting the talent they've worked so hard to assemble in positions to be successful.
Yeah, if you ask this question to 10 people, 9 of them are going to say Auburn needs a QB. That's what everybody's going to spot out. They're going to be like, oh, you need a quarterback.
And it's fair. It's the most important position on the field. But to your point, it goes beyond that. Because even whatever you want to think about Peyton Thorne, I wasn't high on Peyton Thorne. I'm still not saying he had a great year. But you look at him statistically, that team could have won 7 games.
They could have won 8 games.
They should have won at least. They should have probably won 8, to your point. So, yeah, it goes beyond that.
Yeah, I think that, looking at the makeup of this team, you had near just under 1,000-yard receiver. You had one of the most dynamic freshmen in the conference, in the country, in Cam Coleman. You had the second best. I think he was the best back in the SEC if you look at average yards per rush. Obviously, Dylan Sampson at Tennessee had a really good year. He led the SEC in rushing. He had over 70 more carries than Jarquez Hunter, though. So if you give Jarquez those 70 carries, I think he blows Dylan Sampson out of the water in terms of yardage, total yardage, and leads the SEC in rushing. So,
Mike, remember the Kentucky game?
Yeah,
you give him 20 more carries in that game, they probably win.
So, they probably win.
Again, he can't hand it to himself. That's the whole point.
Yeah. You don't lose a lot of games when you give him 20-plus more carries. I wonder if the story will be the same with Damari Alston and Jeremiah Cobb, and these kids that they have coming in from high school. But ultimately, I think Auburn's biggest area of need going into the fall is an offensive identity.
Mhm.
I think any identity, Chris,
Yeah.
because like you
They
said,
have to know what they're good at, what they're not. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses so you can play to them? I agree with you.
yeah, like people are going to point at players, and I think that's maybe a little bit of the obvious answer when we have this discussion. But to me, you're going to have one of the most dynamic wide receiver rooms, I think, in the country. You brought in Eric Singleton, Cam Coleman again is projecting to be one of the best. He's going to be a draft pick, man. He's first round talent, and you've got him in there. You've got another top 30 overall player in Perry Thompson. You brought in Horatio Fields. You've got Malcolm Simmons, who we saw just make plays all over the place. If he is in his playbook this offseason, I think he's going to be dynamic. And if Jackson Arnold can get them the ball, another former 5-star, I'm not seeing where if you're healthy, that you don't have the pieces to put together an 8-win season. To me, it just comes down to how you're utilizing the talent. And they've got to figure that out on the defensive side of the ball. They're doing it. Top 25 defense, man, in the country. DJ Durkin was absolutely smashing it. Look back at that Iron Bowl. God, they produced 4 turnovers in that game. They got the ball back for the offense 4 times. They limited Ryan Williams, the other most dynamic wide receiver that was a freshman in the country, to almost nothing in that game. What more can you do defensively in terms of development? Offensively, I think they need to find a way to produce the same sort of effect.
Yeah, it was around this time last year, Mike, I believe that I remember when Hugh Freeze hired DJ Durkin, and we talked about how, there's always going to be people, I think anytime DJ moves on from one job to another, what have you, his name circulates.
Yeah.
There's personal feelings out there. And whatever, it is what it is, whatever you think about the guy. But the bottom line is he can coach ball. So, and I think that hire worked out the way that I thought it would. So many others thought. I mean, again, the guy can coach ball, and he did that. I don't know that there's a whole lot there. You look on the defensive side that, you want to see them take the next step and continue to improve. But I think you hit the nail on the head, Mike. It really does come back to, and I would say, hey, how do you replace Jarquez Hunter, right? Because he's not back. He is gone, yes, going into this season. So anytime you lose a guy like that who's your bell cow back, it's no guarantee you're going to have that guy. Even if you have somebody very talented, it's no guarantee that guy is waiting in the wings. Tennessee will have the same question, right, with replacing a Dylan Sampson, even though they've got talented players in their backfield. But to your point, it doesn't matter the talent you have if you don't know especially when it comes to crunch time, like what is our bread and butter? What can we lean on? What is the thing that we can go to that we know, whether we're down or we need to ice a game, how are we able to put games away? Do things that we couldn't do in 2024, which again, win games late. Is that Jackson Arnold? Is that, the passing game? Is that more so leaning on a run game? But they've got to be able to figure that out, because I think obviously you can point to, that's a lot of reason for the struggles. Also something we hadn't talked about, Mike, too, is I know special teams is something that for Auburn has not been a bright spot. So, I mean, I guess if you're looking for red flags, areas of concern, areas where Auburn can take a step forward, special teams would be another. But to your point, man, if they don't have an offensive identity, and it's why I was so critical of Hugh Freeze, I think just a week ago on this show, it just, when you're able to assemble the level of talent Auburn has, but you can't put them in a position to be successful and win games, and especially when you have games in your grasp, you should win. That's where it really becomes damning on you.
A lot of resources on the Plains, Chris, to get
Yeah.
the job done. I think we're in hot seat territory with Hugh Freeze here in year 3. They've got to get it done. But look, if you're stressed out about the upcoming football season, visit our friends at the Rogue Shop. RogueShop.com. Use code REPORT to get 15% off that Rogue Shop order. Pain, sleep, stress, anxiety, whatever ails you in life, the Rogue Shop has something that has you covered. I got Richard over there, longtime sponsor of the show. We appreciate his support. Help us out by visiting him. Support those who support us by visiting the Rogue Shop. Again, use code REPORT to get 15% off that Rogue Shop order. And if you got the munchies after that, hit up our friends at Los Amigos Mexican Restaurant, 1220 Fox Run Ave, Suite 200 in Opelika, Alabama. Serving up sweet treats and nice eats over there. A great place to watch the game. Great partners in the community. We appreciate them for sponsoring the segment. And last but certainly not least, this segment is brought to you by our friends at Golden's Cast Iron. Visit goldenscastiron.com/WR to get 15% off your weights with code Get Your Weight Up, and $65 off fire pits and Kamado grills with code TWR. Golden's Cast Iron, making lifetime products. Great community, a great community business. Support local business. Help us out there by visiting them and using these codes to make sure that they know that the War Report sent you. Jumping back in here, Chris. Again, football is months away, but basketball is right here. And the last time I had you on, we talked about the upcoming stretch for Auburn and what would be a good outcome for Auburn basketball in terms of the upcoming schedule. I thought they do well to go 3-3 over that stretch. They haven't lost a game since we last talked. What do you think? Most recently, they took down top 10 Tennessee at home. It wasn't the type of game maybe people were expecting, but Auburn found a way to win it. Janai Broom returned on one leg and was the best player in that game. Clearly, Auburn basketball is number one in the AP again this week. Your thoughts on the Tigers this year?
Yeah, Mike, I think going back to your promo code, get your weight up. That's what Auburn told Tennessee. Get your weight up. I love that. That's an elite promo code, by the way. No, Janai Broom's a warrior, man. I was able to sit down, watch that game in its entirety, start to finish, Auburn, Tennessee. And I'll admit to you, Mike, I took the Vols plus 7.5. I felt like it was going to be a close game. I never thought Tennessee was going to win, but I did not think Tennessee was going to walk in there and get beat by double digits, especially with Janai Broom being less than 100%. Always thought he was going to play. If you love college basketball, though, certainly if you love SEC basketball, I mean, that was a heavyweight fight. I know people use the term rock fight a lot. They overuse it probably. That was really truly the definition of two heavyweight fighters going at it. I expected a lower scoring defensive type of game, certainly coming down to that final shot there. And
I didn't think that low scoring, though. I thought maybe
that was a little bit lower.
70s,
yeah, that was a little bit lower scoring than I thought. But Tennessee, the brand of defense they play, just the physicality of both of those teams was really what was on full display. But it's like I said before, Mike, I just think you look at Auburn, number one, and I don't want to jinx anything, but they're nearly impossible to beat at Neville. I mean, they're so good at Neville Arena. It's you better get them when they come to your place, because more than likely you ain't beating them there. And they're just so deep. I mean, Auburn's just got so many guys. There's a lot of teams in this league, and this league is very deep, obviously. Mike, there's 10 teams in the top 25 right now from the SEC. This league is incredibly deep. All these teams in the SEC have got 2, maybe 3. Some maybe have 4. Auburn's got 5 and then some that can beat you. And I mean, Janai Broom, even when he's, 70%, maybe 80%, still the best player on the floor. I mean, God forbid when he's 100%, which you'll get back to very soon, if not already is. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun to watch. Again, that was elite basketball. Chad Baker-Mazara, another guy that really stood out to me. The guy just hustle play after hustle play, physical. You can really tell it's Bruce Pearl has built it into the culture of not just that team, but the entire program. I think the fan base really embodies it. I mean, it was on full display, man, on Saturday night. So, listen, I don't think I'm saying anything earth-shattering or, spreading any breaking news. Auburn's the team to beat in the SEC. At bottom line, they're the team to beat in the SEC. That doesn't mean they're not going to maybe, take some lumps along the way, or at least have some close contests, because this
they're going to lose.
Listen, they got to listen, Mike. They got to go to Memorial Gymnasium and play Vandy. All right, I'm just telling you. I mean, Vandy's clipping everybody at home, but no, seriously. I mean, right now. I think it's Auburn and then the rest of the SEC.
Look, Vanderbilt has one of the worst media sections in the SEC. I stand on that. Vandy, do better. However, I agree with you. Look, the last time Auburn was number one, it didn't take long for them to fall off that number one ranking when they lost. I think they've earned the right to sit on that number one ranking with a loss. I don't think the Duke should immediately jump them. If you look at they dropped their games. Why isn't Auburn allowed to navigate one of the hardest schedules in college basketball, by the way? One of the most challenging non-conferences we've seen in quite some time. And that you got out of that with one loss on the road at Cameron Indoor. Come on, man. And then the SEC, look at the SEC this year. I did a segment with your guy Dave Shoemate, and we talked about how many teams do we think is going to get into this tournament. At least 11. But Georgia and some of those other teams kind of that will be on the bubble or in that conversation. Holy crap, man. you're going through the schedule. They've already got 11 quad one wins, and they have 7 more quad one opportunities, at least less on the schedule right now as we speak today. That's insane. The record for most quad ones is 16 by Kansas in the 2023 season. Auburn has a chance to beat that. And that's absolutely insane. They played a ridiculous, I think it was 24 quad one games that year. But if you're Auburn, maybe you don't have 24 quad one games there, but they lost 9 of them. And I'll tell you this, man, at the end of the day, Bruce Pearl has something special. I want to note this. Denver Jones, Chad Baker Mazzara, Tahad Pettiford, and Miles Kelly were a combined 0 for 19 going into the half of that game. And they won. If Janai Broom doesn't come back, you lose that game, right? If those guys play an average game, you probably win by double digits. I don't think that Tennessee did anything special to contain those guys. They just weren't making shots. That's what I saw.
Yeah, it was just kind of the flow of the game. I don't know what
Yeah.
it was. It was just neither team really wanted to, or I mean, wanted to certainly, but maybe it was the nerves. Maybe it was, game day was in town, obviously, for that one, and there's a little bit extra on that game. So, but, styles make fights. And again, Mike, I think the physicality, and I think I even heard Bruce Pearl say they were kind of rushing some things a little bit. I just think it was kind of the way that game went. It's like every other sport. Some nights you got a pitching duel. Some nights it's a slugfest. You just never really know. Just kind of depends on what version of your team shows up that night. And for both sides, obviously, it was more of the defensive-minded, let's slug it out. And listen, give Auburn credit, too. They had to come from behind in that game multiple times. I mean, it looked like Tennessee maybe was starting to build some momentum and took the lead. And, I think you got to give Auburn a lot of credit, obviously, for fighting back. And, you mentioned Tahad Pettiford. I love watching him play, too. He's a fantastic player, a lot of fun. There's so many guys again on this Auburn roster that you just named off and mentioned that, that's what's going to make them so difficult as we go through. And I agree with you too. And I think it works. It bears repeating. Auburn deserves to be number one even if they lose a game. Again, at this point, you've seen so much of them. It's not like we just started conference play. You've seen so much of them. Teams are going to lose games. If you lose a game, fine. But I do agree with you. Auburn should stay in that number one spot. They've earned that. And, man, I don't want to look too far ahead, Mike, because obviously there's other big conference games coming up. But, you look now, I think Auburn's on the more manageable side of that 6-game stretch we talked about with LSU. You go to Ole Miss, which the Pavilion's always tough, but an Ole Miss team that's struggling. Oklahoma, again, at Neville. OU's kind of on that bubble talk. You will get Florida. But as you look further in the schedule, I can't lie to you, man. I'm really excited to watch them take on Alabama. That's going to be the Iron Bowl on the hardwood is going to be the must-see ball game of the season.
Chris, that game is going to be what I think we thought Auburn, Tennessee was going to be. Some of the luster came off of it with Tennessee losing a couple headed into that game. But with both teams top 5 in the country and Auburn sitting on that number 1, let me tell you something. SEC supremacy is on the line in those two matchups. And if you're Auburn, it might be the difference between winning the regular season crown and not. Look, man, I still don't think Alabama, the way they play defense, is a top 5 team. I'll die on that hill. They're a top 10 team. I just don't think they're top 5. We'll see. We'll see what happens when these two teams meet. Lots of storylines there with Aiden Holloway and Mark Sears.
Yeah, and to your point, Mike, things aren't perfect. I was going to say they're not perfect in Paradise and in Tuscaloosa with Sears getting benched and his mom going on social media. And,
my God.
I mean, that's it's funny. That's kind of your typical like in season stories that we forget about like 6 months from now, but like in season, they're such a big deal. We see that in every single sport. But I'll tell you this too, man. Lastly, that not that anybody needs me to tell them that, but I know that this last week and a half or so, there's a lot of people that are maybe won't admit it, but a lot of SEC fans that are now starting to kind of, they're starting to kind of creep into basketball. Football's officially behind us. We're in the off season. I'm telling you, because I mean, listen, I was one admittedly going into early January. I hadn't watched as much of it. We've just been doing so many other things. Watch SEC basketball, man. It is an electric factory every single night. And side note, Mike, I'm doing a great job right now, fingers crossed, on the gambling side. So I'm hoping to continue that. Maybe that's why I'm saying if I was reversing my record, I might be telling you, man, I'm never watching another game again. But no, it's in all seriousness, man. It's if you're not watching SEC basketball yet, do not wait till March Madness because it is theater every night. I mean, you might look at the slate Tuesday, Wednesday this week. Well, we got a couple 8.5-point spreads. Expect chaos. Expect buzzer beaters. It just delivers every night, man. So if you're not watching, I know Auburn fans are, but if you're anybody out there, you're not watching SEC basketball, don't wait till March Madness, man. You want to make sure you're getting invested now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm invested. I was in the house. I've never heard Neville so loud as it was on Saturday. They've got more moments coming this season. Tickets to Auburn, Tennessee were ridiculous. Tickets to Auburn, Alabama might be in record breaking. So I can't wait for that. Chris, I want to thank you for joining me today. Before we get out of here, tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, Mike, you're the man. I appreciate you having me on. Appreciate you having all of us on over from SEC Unfiltered. Dave Shoemate as well. We really appreciate that. We're at SEC Unfiltered, X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you get your content, YouTube, podcast, of course, and SECUnfiltered.com for all the latest content from us. Mike, it's always a pleasure, man. I really appreciate you having me on.
Guys, thank you so much for giving us a listen today. And look, if you want more content like this, please hit like and subscribe. We are the War Report on every social media platform. TW Report on TikTok. We're signing off, and as always, War Eagle.